and welcome to another episode of Thinking Broadly. This is a series produced by the Symphonic Committee of the Percussive Arts Society. And today, our special guest here is Brian Stotz. Brian is the lead percussion instrument technician at the Eastman School of Music, also percussionist with the Rochester Philharmonic, also the owner of a business called Percussions there in Rochester. My name is Philip O'Banion, and I'm professor at Temple University in Philadelphia and the current chair of the Symphonic Committee. So, Brian, let me just turn it right over to you. Thanks for joining us today. Maybe you could talk a little bit about exactly what your job entails, maybe what a typical day looks like, if there is such a thing, and basically how you got started in the business.
Well, let's see. Let's work backwards. I graduated from Eastman in 1979, and once I graduated, I no longer had access to the practice facilities here. So at that point, it becomes a question, okay, well, how do you practice? And being a somewhat half-starving college graduate, I had to find instruments somewhere, somehow. So I put an ad in the local paper, and as luck would have it, there was a xylophone and a set of bells that were for sale. So I checked them out, and they were in pretty rough shape, but the price was right. So I bought those. And then it became a question of, okay, these are in rough shape. What do I do to get them into playing shape? And at the time, there was no one anywhere in the country who did anything to mallet instruments other than tuning the bars. So fortunately, my dad, who was a terrific mechanical engineer, woodworker, metalworker, he said, why don't we try and repair these things? It can't be that difficult. And as it turned out, it was a little bit of trial and error, but he helped me a great deal. So the xylophone I rebuilt, and the glockenspiel I made a new case for, and then I had two playable instruments. So then, as I recall, this was 42 years ago, one of the local band directors here in Rochester had heard what I did, and he said, well, why don't you come over, take a look at our percussion instruments in the band, see if you can do anything, which I did. And then one thing led to another, word of mouth. I didn't do any advertising early in the formation of the business, but one thing led to another. So fast forward to around 1985, and by then the business was full-time. And when I say full-time, I mean full-time. It was generally 50 to 60 hours a week, usually 7 days a week, because there was just such a need for repairing percussion instruments that hadn't existed before. So then fast forward even farther to 2006, and that's when my former professor here at Eastman, John Beck, had the great idea to create the position of percussion tech. And that has since become full-time, because here at Eastman, we've got about over 1,600 pieces of gear. And you mentioned a typical day. Well, there is no typical day, which is one of the things I love about the job.
Right. Yeah.
Is that a week ago, I replaced, let's see if I can remember, I replaced 32 concert tom heads. And the week before, I did, I think, 8 timpani heads. And then shipments will arrive that I have to get. And the one thing that I'm not looking forward to is we have a 5-octave mallet tech marimba that needs to be packed and shipped to mallet tech. And guess who does that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's hours and hours of packaging. And I thought to myself, maybe it'd be easier to drive there to New Jersey. My wife said, don't be crazy. So again, there is no typical day down here, but that's one of the things, that's one of the perks of the job.
That's great. So you're really looking over the entire fleet of the school's equipment and inventory. Now, you're
Right.
still doing some work for other clients with your business, or this is taking all your time at this point?
Yeah, it is. It is taking all of my time. Every so often, I'll get a job from a local high school where they'll say, you know, we've got 8 timpani here. Can you replace the heads? That kind of thing. But the clientele I had from 20, 25 years ago, and that business is kind of on the back burner right now. I'm still working on instruments of my own to rebuild and eventually sell. But the percussion tech job plus Rochester Philharmonic, you know, there's this thing called sleep.
Right.
Like to squeeze that in every so often.
Right. Well, you've got plenty to do, which is a good problem to have. I'm curious about your current projects besides changing heads and getting ready for the academic year at Eastman. Do you have any other special projects or instruments that you're working on restoring?
Yeah, I just we have let's see, we have two very old Rogers drum set bass drums, and you know how some of these instruments, when they're very old, the pearl covering starts to crack and peel. So those have been totally stripped and new pearl covering put back on. I bought another kick drum a couple weeks ago, same deal. It was in rough shape, but $75. Replace that pearl covering, and then clean up the hardware, new heads, repaint the hoops, and got three brand new looking kick drums.
That's great. That's great. Those are fantastic drums. Um, so I'm curious, Brian, how would someone, say a young student, sort of, you sort of described your process into getting into this business and sort of learning some of these skills. These are not skills that are typically taught, in most conservatories and universities, at least currently, right? I mean, there are places where you can go to study to become a piano technician, but I had a student at Sewanee last month, the music festival, say, "Hey, I might be interested in going into sort of percussion tech and instrument work, and or even like piano tech work." And there are obviously programs he could go to study the piano side of things, but there's not for percussion. So what would you recommend that a student like this do? How would they get their feet wet? How would they break into this kind of work?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is a student here who just graduated, and he's like a mirror image of myself from 40 years ago, in that he's a little bit handy, and his dad is very handy. So they have rebuilt a couple of instruments. But as far as a course anywhere, I have no idea, and I really would be surprised if you can go to any other school and say, hey, I want to become a percussion tech, and they'd say, well, isn't that nice?
Right.
So I think it's one of those things where, unfortunately, I think you have to learn by doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, woodworking skills,
Yeah,
what are the practical things? Obviously, just start doing this
right.
kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that a lot of the students could take up on their own is to get with a timpanist in an orchestra in their area, and they might be gracious enough to just show them how to replace timpani heads, because that I've found is one of the main things, if you will, that goes wrong in a high school band, is the timpani heads will be just shot. And that's something that a student could start with. You're not going to necessarily be able to rebuild a xylophone frame or replace a glockenspiel case, but you can get started just by timpani heads or drum heads, that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And all programs need regular head changing, but
Yep.
and 90% of timpani playing is maintenance, right? So
Oh, you
just
bet.
getting your hands on the instruments and making sure that these sound good.
Exactly.
How important are just your ears and just the musical skills that you've developed as a percussionist and as an artist and as a musician with the RPO? How important are those skills to the work that you do with these instruments?
I'd say it's pretty important. It's not vital. Um, Obviously, when you're changing timpani heads, you want them to sound great. Um, and I don't do a lot of fussing per se with the sound right away. It's mainly you get the heads on perfectly lined up, and I learned that mounting from Charles Ross, RPO's timpanist. And I don't want to say it's foolproof, but it's pretty darn foolproof. If you do stuff exactly mechanically all lined up perfectly, the drum is usually going to sound great. And the
Yeah.
same with other drums. Bass drum, I think, is one that we run into where, why does that drum sound so bad? Well, the head isn't tuned up properly. Those type of things that I notice, with the bigger drums.
Yeah, that leads me to another question. Are there typical things that you see that, sort of tricks of the trade that you could share with the audience here of common things or even like maintenance items that you see go unchecked that can really cause damage to
Yeah.
the instruments over time?
Well, I think, getting back to timpani, around here, the timpani are moved a lot, and not always by stagehands, but occasionally by stagehands, and they're great people, but it's not their job always to be super duper careful.
Right.
And what I always tell the students is to make sure the pedals are pushed down pretty far. So if the counter hoop gets bumped or something bumps into it, the head is not going to shift. One of the things around here that I do a lot is repairing hardware, like cymbal stands, concert tom stands, because if those are not put away carefully and properly, the wing screws will get bent or stripped.
Right.
And there's only so many times you can rethread those, which is possible. But after a while, then it just becomes garbage. So my bottom line around here with the students, number one is do not rush. Have plenty of time to set up and put stuff away afterwards, because it's when they start to hurry, that's when I see the accidents happen, when, just generally out of carelessness. And to also say, first of all, this isn't your stuff, but you should treat it as if it's your equipment. And also, when you're done here in 2, 3, 4 years, there are going to be other students who need to use these things. So please be mindful of that. Usually most of them are, occasionally some aren't. I'm
Right.
sure
Yeah.
you know the drill at Temple.
Sure. These instruments are your voice or their voice, at least for that time
Yeah,
being, right? And so
exactly.
we have to take care of it like a singer would their voice.
That's it. You got it.
Absolutely. I'm curious. I think you're up at your office today, right? Was
I
there
am.
any little curiosities or instruments that you wanted to share with us today or show us?
Oh,
Um,
sure. A few years ago, Eastman Percussion Ensemble did a piece by James Wood called Village Burial. And it's a very unique piece, but one of the things that's really unique about it are these instruments called microxyles. I'll just turn the monitor so you can get a picture of it. I'll put my glasses on too, but the microxyles are basically pieces of 1¼ inch dowel that have to be cut in such a way that each dowel is just a fraction, very small fraction of pitch difference.
the quarter
So
tone, or is it even smaller? Some kind of
yeah,
microtone. Yeah.
so this instrument is taller than me, and obviously it's played um, horizontal, but there's no room in my office because my office is small. But there, in the Village Burial piece, there are 5 of these, and the percussionists take usually a glockenspiel mallet. I don't have one in my office right now. I've got a wooden bass drum mallet, but they scrape it from one end to the other, and as they go up, you can hear the pitch change. So I'll do a little short demo right here and now. That's the microxyle. Doesn't get used very much, but for Village Burial, it's a really cool effect.
It's absolutely essential, and it's a great piece in the repertoire, and it's a
Yeah,
fantastic sound and color in that sort of percussive soundscape.
yeah.
So
So
that's great.
these
And I think,
these yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, I think I heard some sixen or similar instrument that you built for some Xenakis one time, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yes, the Sixen. I don't remember what year I built those, but that was another very lengthy project where I had to take aluminum channel and cut all these channels to specific lengths, and I got the plans from somebody at Third Coast Percussion. I don't recall who, but that was easily 100 hours, because I don't know if there's any I don't know the exact word. If they're the 6 in themselves, there are 6 of them in this piece,
Right.
and each one has 17 of these notes, and it was aluminum channel, 3-inch wide and 1-inch high. So you can imagine the length of time it took to cut all these. But then, because this was just raw aluminum from a metal outfit, I spent hours sanding them because they just looked horrible. So
Mhm.
that took the most time. Plus, I had to build frames for them. I wish I could have brought one in here, but there's no room in here to show it.
Yeah.
Um, so those are the things, it's always funny with Michael Burritt, who there's no one with whom I could work better. He is just the greatest. Um, he has never, since he's been here, he's never said to me, Brian, do this, or I need this. He'll say, I'm thinking of doing this piece for a percussion ensemble. It requires blah, blah, blah. What do you think? So every couple years he throws out one of these big projects, and he always says, you're going to drive yourself crazy, and I know you're going to hate me, um, but it's just so much fun for me to take on these challenges and build something. I just love to build things. And in my 16 years here, every couple of years I have a big project like that.
Mhm.
And so far this year, none, but we'll see. You never know.
Yeah, it's a different kind of a creative outlet for you then,
Oh
I
yeah,
guess. Yeah,
because otherwise, as he said to other people, not to be arrogant or anything, but he said if I wasn't here, he wouldn't be able to do these pieces.
right.
Which I don't quite agree with, because there are a number of people in the area who could probably take these things on, like a metal shop or a woodworking place for the microxyle. But I think the difference is they're not, most of them, or probably none of them, are musicians.
Right. And that's
And
that's the difference. Yeah.
that's the difference. Exactly.
And I know as someone else who runs a university percussion program that I'm extremely jealous. Of the idea of having someone with your expertise and skill set, Brian, that could help with those kind of projects because they are extremely time consuming.
Oh yeah.
Take time away from other artistic activities.
Oh
But
sure. But they
it's
they sure are
fantastic.
fun.
Yeah, that's great, and you enjoy the work so much. Anything else that you might want to share or talk about related to your work or your experiences in the business or in music?
Well, I just consider myself one of the luckiest people there is, because first of all, um, I get paid to do what I love. I mean, you can't beat that. So here I am at Eastman, my former alma mater that I love dearly, and I get to do all these projects. I mean, not all of them are 100% great. The drudgery every so often, but I think to myself, just think of the former colleagues I know. Some of them aren't even in music anymore. How many of them would trade places with me? So that's one thing. Then I'm in a symphony orchestra as well. I have my business at home, which isn't quite what it was years ago, but I'm just very, very fortunate to be able to do these things that I enjoy. And the other perks, which aren't really to me, but this job allows Michael Burritt to concentrate on teaching and the students to concentrate on learning their profession. So neither Michael Burritt nor the students are having to deal with logistics or repair instruments. Um, and that's another big thing to me. It's very important that they're able to do their thing. And I just do my thing. And I hate to sound corny, but it's kind of one big happy family.
Yeah. Well, that's a tremendous service then that you provide and freeing up a lot of time and mental space for others to do what they do best.
And
Um,
it's all due to the foresight of John Beck.
Yeah, that's great because these projects and the logistical side of what we do can become sort of all consuming, right? If you
Oh,
if
you
you let
bet.
it. Absolutely. So it's great when you have someone who develops skills like you've done over your career and who really is invested in the sounds and the artistic statement that these instruments can make, and then enjoys doing it, right? Enjoys the
Absolutely.
creative side of building and repairing and these
You
things.
bet.
So I would imagine, and I would hope certainly that there will be more opportunities for folks getting into the field, so to speak, over the next couple of decades. Would you imagine the same?
Oh, I would think so, and I think, um, again, for any of these students who are interested, um, to just see what they can do on their own, and not, take apart a xylophone, or, totally disassemble a kettle drum. But yeah, I think more and more that the universities that I know of locally, they don't have anyone. And then it becomes a question of, okay, well, this instrument, which still has some life, can anybody fix it, or do we just chuck it and buy new? And most of these universities and colleges, they don't have the funds to replace. Um, so that, I think we'll see if they have the foresight down the road to think along those lines. But I think definitely through other parts of the country, there are opportunities for students to do what I'm doing. They might not get in the door right away, or certainly to the extent where I am, but I definitely think there are opportunities.
Yeah, and I think just like anything else in music or the arts, it's a process, right? It's something that
You bet.
you start to build skills slowly,
Oh,
and
yeah,
every piece, every project informs that skill set and what you can then take on in the future.
exactly.
So,
Right. And you never stop learning.
right.
Even at my advanced age, I'm still trying to learn things like, oh, well, that didn't work. Maybe I'll try this. Maybe that'll work better. So yeah, your skill set, I didn't know as much as I do now 42 years ago.
That's great. That's great. And it's not something you get from a textbook. These sort of
Right.
skills, I don't think. There's a few books out there on percussion repair and maintenance, but most of them are rather dated. And so
Yep.
we'll look forward to your book, Brian. Okay,
Yeah,
when
right.
you can find time,
Oh my goodness.
uh,
Right.
that would become an instant classic, and I'm sure we'd all love to read it.
Well, we'll
So you,
see. You're not the first one who's mentioned that.
awesome, very
Who
good.
knows?
Very good. Well, I appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day to share a little bit about your career and your work with us. It sounds fascinating, and I'm sure that if others have questions and want to follow up, that they know where to find you at the Eastman School or there and with the
Anytime.
Rochester Phil.
You bet.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Brian. This has been terrific, and thank you everyone for joining us today.